Hey Trekkies, we're back after the holiday break with more Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Playing Clue at 5:36, Ferengi Icarus. Or Suspicions. You know Trek's going to be mediocre when a pre-credit intro is a minute or less. A group of scientists come to the Enterprise to see a Ferengi shield design that can help a ship survive inside a star. During the first test, the pilot is killed, and a mystery ensues to whether the shield failed or whether someone sabotaged it. In between, the Ferengi creator is killed, complicating matters, and Crusher performs an autopsy against the wishes of his family to not turn up anything anyway. That almost gets her tossed out of Starfleet till she flies the test shuttle herself into the star to prove it works. Only to be confronted by the original pilot everyone thought was dead. He sabotaged himself so he could get the Ferengi out of the picture, and then Bev kills him. I get that this guy's race has powers to simulate death, but Beverly performed an autopsy on him. That means she removed his organs. How is he still coming, even after she blasts a hole in him with a phaser? This is the last time we'll see Guinan appear in the TV run of TNG. Becoming Amish at 5:35, Simpler Times. Or Paradise. O'Brien and Sisko are surveying a star system in a runabout when they detect one of those ever-popular unknown human colonies. After beaming down to take a look, they find that none of their devices work because something is blocking all EM fields on the planet. The group of humans they find are the survivors of a crash years before. A woman named Alexis is their leader, and thankfully she had a ton of physical paper books about survival when they crashed. In the end, it turns out this crazy woman caused the crash of the ship originally, turned off the artificial EM blocker, beamed up to the runabout, and set a course to try to destroy it. When Kira and Dax get to the other runabout and find Sisko, they take Alexis with them to be tried in Federation court. I've got a bunch of nitpicking to do with this episode. When Dax and Kira try to get Sisko's runabout to drop out of warp, they have to try a dangerous tractor beam maneuver. What about the prefix codes to remote control it? Maybe only captains and above have access to those? Why at the end does one guy seem to speak for the whole community about staying there anyway, even though the Federation just took Alexis, who was the glue holding the whole ridiculous thing together in the first place? Not DS9's best showing, but not even close to the worst. Babbling in Bajoran at 5:34, Awakening. Or Repression. A former Maquis Bajoran Vedic apparently brainwashed Tuvok 7 years before when he was undercover. Now, for no apparently good reason at all, he triggers Tuvok to awaken the patriotic spirit of the former Maquis on Voyager, now that they get mail through Pathfinder. The saving grace is Tuvok investigating an incident he caused, but in an unconscious state. The Pogtem Far Batane parts and random people yelling throughout pulled this episode down. Also, why would Tuvok be left his comm badge in the brig? An episode that feels really out of place for Voyager's 7th season. Feeling nostalgic at 5:33, The Picard Maneuver. Or The Battle. The Enterprise meets with a Ferengi ship, and in an unprofitable venture, they give back Picard's original ship that he faced a court-martial for abandoning, the Stargazer. It's really a ploy to get a mind control device close enough to Picard to make him go insane, and reenact the battle with, at the time, an unknown Ferengi adversary. This one drags and is a touch hokey at times, but rounds out Picard's character a smidge in the early episodes of Season 1. But as far as the dumpster fire that is Season 1 TNG, this has all the pieces of a classic Trek plot that's mostly acted well. Why is Riker on one side of the table when everyone else is sitting on the other? Wesley figures out what's going on and understandably feels underappreciated, as usual. Doing time at 5:32, Escape from Aquatiri, or The Shoot. If you didn't know yet that Harry Kim is the one in this series to suffer, we're dropped straight into him dumped into prison for a crime he didn't commit and beat up. The bulk of the rest of the runtime is them trying to escape, just to find out they're not underground but in space, the big reveal of which is the high point of the episode. In a completely unbelievable rescue, Neelix's rarely used ship and Voyager's crew break them out, just before Harry and Tom are both killed. The bond between Tom and Harry in this one, through the slow psychosis they're going through as part of their punishment, is phenomenal character development. And we get probably the ultimate 47 reference from Tom near the beginning of the episode.
We killed 47 patrollers at Akrotiri. 47!
Getting sensual at 5:31. Sex Sells, Part 2. Or Rajin. The Zindi send a sexy chick to infiltrate Enterprise to gain more knowledge about humans. She does weird mind sex with T'Pol and others to get where she's going. Zindi reptilians and insectoids break her out of the brig, and that's the episode. This one does the bare minimum to move the Zindi story arc along and hangs the entire thing on the over-sexualization of television in the early 2000s. Coming to terms with family at 5:30, Resentment. Or the alternate. Odo nearly starts a collection of Ferengi-desiccated remains when it's revealed that the holosex guru Plague is still alive and Quark is selling someone else. After the intro banter between Odo and Quark, the scientist that discovered Odo, Dr. Moira, comes to the station, only to have Odo resent him to the point of subconsciously doing weird things around the station during his regeneration cycle, and has no memory of doing it. This episode tries really hard to be a message about forgiving family for just doing their best during youth to be raised the right way. It definitely gets some points for trying, but the episode also has a lot of problems. For starters, one of the worst matte paintings in Trek history. That's way too close to the foreground. Some terrible VFX at the end when Odo turns into Flubber to try and attack Moira. The whole thing in general is really condescending and not the greatest episode. Number 529 fails hard at redemption. Neelix plays Dope Wars. Or Fair Trade. When Voyager reaches the edge of where Neelix's Delta Quadrant knowledge ends, he starts trying to ingratiate himself to the captain and others in hopes he can remain useful and on the ship. They dock at a space station to trade for supplies where Neelix runs into an old friend. Neelix feels like he owes Wixabon something because he spent years in prison while Neelix didn't get in trouble for an extra-legal venture the two were engaged in. Which leads Neelix to be led by Wix into a current nefarious adventure that's supposed to gain Neelix star charts he hopes will impress Janeway. In the end, the moral of the story is that he's valued by Voyager's crew, even if all he's doing is making Leola root stew. I have one question for this episode portraying selling meth. If the punishment for drug trafficking is 50 years in cryostatic prison, and the punishment for murder is 50 years, what's the penalty for jaywalking? Slithering through tunnels at 5:28, Nickelodeon Gak. Or Devil in the Dark. Here's an example of an episode that has a good premise that could be ranked higher if it hadn't stretched the runtime with hokey filler at every turn. That's a word I'm using less and less in this ranking series, but it applies here. We open to a group of miners and none of the main characters, which is a rare moment in Trek and TOS in particular. The Enterprise responds to a distress call from the miners of Janus 6, where it turns out they've discovered the last member of an ancient species of tunneling silicon-based life, and the miners have been inadvertently removing its eggs and trying to kill it. So it killed them first. After a long, ridiculous mind meld, Spock figures out what's going on and gets Kirk to mediate an agreement between the miners and the life forms. It's a touching story about cooperation between completely unlike species. However, the problems start with this creature's design. It looks like piles of puke on a blanket and cousin to Pizza the Hut. For some reason, the species all die out except one every 50,000 years, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Another problem is a line of red shirts that beam down to help hunt the creature, and surprisingly, it doesn't turn into a red shirt die mass kill trope. Spock goes from save the creature to kill it to save it really quickly based on nothing until the very end. This is the first episode to feature Bones doing the classic "I'm a doctor, not a" joke, which in this episode, he's not a bricklayer. It's definitely a fun watch, but doesn't make it out of the 500s on this list. Making its series debut in the list at number 527, Sarek is Dying. Or Leth. I'm sure this is a bit controversial to say that Discovery, the franchise's red-headed stepchild and current punching bag, is better than nearly a third of Star Trek as a whole. But there it is. Production value alone gives it a leg up over what we've seen come below in these rankings. Even through questionable season arcs, when you try watching Disco in random order, you start to see that almost every episode has something interesting and redeemable about it. Though I have to admit, so far some of Season 4 may end up being ranked lower than this. But I won't be talking about seasons after 3 till the original 755 episodes I set out to do are laid out to everyone. This particular episode is the worst episode of Discovery at this point because of the amount of ridiculous filler. I'm a big fan of James Frain as Sarek. He's a worthy successor to the late great Mark Leonard in the role. But the Vulcan martial arts between him and Michael when she's in his mind multiple times feel like they come out of nowhere. Explaining the relationship between Michael and Sarek gives us a bit of nice character development in the end, but getting there is not half the fun. The other plot is a sexcapade gone wrong between Admiral Cornwell and Lorca, which ends with her wanting to recommend to Starfleet he be relieved of command, but she gets kidnapped going to the negotiations with the Klingons before she can let them know. Honestly, the best part of the episode is the intro with Tilly and Burnham running through the ship that gives us the now famous disco t-shirts. And who could forget green juice? Extra green.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Majel. Thanks, Majel. Majel.
Stand by.
Thanks, Majel.
Confirmed.
Majel.
Tractor beam in place.
Thanks, Majel.
Autopsy files are restricted to active medical personnel only.
Thanks, Majel.
External temperature 0.8 million kelvins and rising.
Thanks, Majel.
Crewman Jor is in the mess hall.
Majel.
Lieutenant Torres is in cargo bay 2.
Thanks, Majel.
Stardate 54090.4. Commander Chakotay is in sickbay.
Thanks, Majel.
Unable to comply.
Majel.